It's time. It's been requested ever since the third episode of Drag Race UK for me to do the Favoritism of Baga Chipz video, and the wait is finally over. Because I'm able to string up a couple of days where I don't have to work non-stop for uni. How are we gonna do this? Looking at my previous videos regarding the way some queens were treated, either in a very positive or a very negative manner, there are a couple of ways we can approach this. Given that the favoritism of Baga had more to do with her placements more or less each week rather than the edit of the storyline that she was given, we're going to be going over every single episode of Drag Race UK, except for the finale episode of course, and point out all the times that she was treated better than the rest of the contestants. Essentially, we're looking at the critiques given to her and the other queens, but also what the challenge or the runway theme asked from the girls. And yes, I know that the runway doesn't always really matter, but, and this is the only time I'm going to interject with my own opinion, except for at the end where I go into the conclusion of the video, they shouldn't have a runway, especially with themes and guidelines, if they don't want us to care about it. When we finish all of the episodes, I will give you some of my theories as to why she was treated the way she was. This video is not an attack on Baga Chipz as a human individual, nor as a drag artist, nor is it supposed to be malicious in any way. Without any further ado, let's begin with episode 1. So, in this episode, Baga Chipz placed high. This episode's maxi challenge was runway based, meaning that the queens had to present 2 looks each. One that represents their hometown, and one that's essentially a redo of Queen Elizabeth II's look. Baga chose to do an Amy Winehouse-esque look for her hometown look, and this look for her Queen Elizabeth look. There were no contrasting critiques with the other girls, meaning that one queen was criticized for something that Baga was praised for. That didn't happen. However, here we do get the first mention of Baga looking a little too old in drag. Moving on to the next episode, where we had that extremely confusing acting challenge, confusing in the sense that the writing was all over the place, but hey, it's Drag Race. Where Baga's much better, I'm not gonna do the voice, catchphrase was first uttered. For her silly and over-the-top performance, Baga won the maxi challenge and so ensured that her teammates were all high placing, not like high, never mind. She didn't get a chance to be critiqued here, but there is something that we can talk about. Well, the runway theme for the second episode was basically Bond girls. Now, I'm not well versed in the Bond universe, and I have very minimal knowledge on the whole franchise, so I had to do some research for this, and even after doing this head research, I'm confused. What the fuck does Liza Minnelli have to do with James Bond? As far as I'm aware, the Bond girls are all mostly younger women, really good looking, at times with interesting fashion, and at times just, I'm assuming, allergic to clothes, so I'm quite baffled. The only relation her look has to the Bond series is her top hat, which relates to the character of Oddjob, and the fact that the rim of his hat had like a blade or something sharp and metal in it, so that it can be used as a weapon. And trust me, Oddjob was not a Bond girl. Overall, a very confused concept that shouldn't have been critiqued, or at least mentioned as kinda missing the mark, but wasn't because much better. We have a lot to go over for the third episode. This was the first design challenge of the season, kind of like a drag on a dime challenge, though here it was called Posh on a Penny, and this was Baga's outfit. She was safe here, so not critiqued. 2 weeks in a row she wasn't critiqued on her runway look, and in the first episode, something that she could have been critiqued for was not mentioned, that is, wearing essentially a costume of a person from your hometown and not really representing your hometown, in a scenario where somebody maybe doesn't know where the famous person is from. But criticizing her for that would mean that they'd have to criticize the Vivienne for the same thing, and I think they wanted to avoid doing that, given that she had won that ambassador tingaling, and they probably wanted her to win the entire show. Let's get into the critiques at the bottom 3, Something Wrong, Vinegar Strokes, and Cheryl Hall got, and see if any are applicable for Baga's look. Something's critiques were that her look was too basic, but with an interesting concept. Well made, or well constructed rather, but that it needed some refining. All of these, but the positives, can be said about Baga's look. She just glued these dish washing thingies onto a corset and some panties, and that was that. And she didn't even do that right, given that the things were almost falling off as she was walking, and that the back of her corset was not covered properly, and it made her look boxy to the point where we can't even argue if it looks bad, because it looked awful. Something wrong was in the bottom too. Baga was safe. Vinegar's critiques were all negative. Her heel was too short, so was Baga's. Things were falling off, so was the case with Baga. The nude illusion didn't work. Well, okay, Baga didn't have a nude illusion, so I guess a point for her. And the look was messy, so was Baga's. Vinegar was in the bottom too and then eliminated. Baga was safe. And finally, Cheryl was critiqued for not knowing how to sew, which is valid, but Baga couldn't sew either, and Cheryl at least made her outfit look like an actual wearable outfit that went well together, whereas Baga did not. Cheryl Hall was low in this episode, while Baga Chipz was safe. Episode 4 is the Snatch Game episode. There is no doubt that Baga and Viv did the best. However, even their performances, or rather the characters they picked, are favored on Snatch Game. But that's a topic for another video, keep an eye out for that. There are two things that I want to discuss here: Baga's runway look and the double win between her and the Vivienne. Firstly, the runway. The theme was weird science, genetically modified queens. This was Baga's look. Do you see the problem? Do you see how none of what she did made sense with what was asked of her? But then again, most of the queens didn't do what was asked of them. What's funny to me is that her look was described as futuristic, and sure, we definitely would relate genetic modification and weird science and fantasy with the future, but that's not what the guidelines of the runway were. Now, the double win. Alan Carr said something during the critiques that I think cemented the double win, but also the pushing of Baga and Viv to the finale, and then the subsequent win of the latter. He said that he wouldn't mind, well, but he would actually love to see a sitcom with Margaret Thatcher and Donald Trump living together in an apartment. A comedy show with Maggie and Trump.
Coming this December.
Welcome to Morning TNT.
Starring the Vivienne as Donald Trump and Baga Chipz as Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah. In episode 5, we don't have much to go over, other than, of course, the triple win. Assuming that Baga, Blue, and Divina did the same in the Maxi Challenge, as in each of them did just as well as the other two, why not have their runway looks decide the winner? Well, my lovely lads, it's because in that case, Baga would have been the first one out of the running for the win, and we gotta keep Baga looking strong, like the possible TNT show would be a gold mine. Also, Baga in this episode had a moment on the runway where she realized that, fashion-wise, she's not in the same league as the rest of the girls. The 6th episode is mildly infuriating to watch. There, the queens had to create commercials for their brands of water, and of course they had to make them funny. The problem in this episode comes with the fact that Baga is basically praised and then saved for something that both Cheryl and Blue were criticized for. Let me elaborate. Cheryl's ad was criticized for being a bit too same old, and without having a clear concept, whereas Baga was praised for relying on the randomness in her comedy and her use of much better. Funnily enough, Michelle Visage, somebody who has to play the Simon Cowell role of the unlikable judge on Drag Race, criticized Baga for this as opposed to Cheryl, the singer, who was praising Baga for her LOL randomness. Am I saying that Michelle Visage did her job right for the first time in 70 years? Yes, I am. Blue, on the other hand, was criticized because her comedy was too blue, excuse the pun, and because she relied too much on that, something that she's done previously on the show. And Baga was praised for the exact same things. Let's also look at their runway looks. Yeah, so how exactly was Blue in the bottom two here? My assumption is that with Baga and Cheryl in the bottom two, they had conflicting storylines. If Baga had won and Cheryl had gone home, they knew that the audience would have called bullshit on Baga beating Cheryl in a lip sync to a dance song, but also we were shown and the production knew behind the scenes that Baga did not know the words to the lip sync song. Furthermore, they would have lost that story of will she, won't she with Cheryl in the top 4 episode. Also, Cheryl wouldn't have had that moment of underperforming the entire season and winning a lip sync to a Cheryl song in front of Cheryl, Cheryl making Cheryl proud, and Cheryl getting her moment with Cheryl. Something that Cheryl had wanted her entire life because she loved Girls Aloud and girl groups. And did you know Cheryl loved girl groups and that Cheryl was in one of them and that Cheryl does Cheryl in a Girls Aloud drag group? Okay, I'm gonna stop the joke now. Anyways, if Cheryl had won, they would have lost Baga and the aforementioned show with the Viv. Or maybe that's what I thought while filming the show at least. So, in order to have the season end the way they wanted it to end, they had to sacrifice Blue. The final episode took all the possible negative comments Baga could have got in the previous 6 episodes, and it just threw them at her all at once. So there isn't really a case for the favoritism of Baga in this episode. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. She was in the bottom 2 with Cheryl Hole, and magically, the lip sync song was an Amy Winehouse song, Cheryl was in a dance costume, Baga was in an all-black look. I'm not saying that some things were set up to ensure Baga staying over Cheryl, but some things were set up to ensure Baga staying over Cheryl. Now that we're done with all of the episodes, let's talk about the whole season overall. So essentially, Baga was never critiqued for things that she should have been critiqued for that would maybe help her have a better visual showing on the season. When the critiques that she could have got were aplenty, she just wasn't critiqued at all, whereas when other queens did something similarly to her, she was praised for it for the most part, while the rest weren't. Why was this? Well, the obvious one is the thing about the prize of the show. The winner gets to have their own show on WoW Presents, and ideally, they're looking for a funny queen. Someone who can hold their own when given a topic, someone who's, again, funny, and somebody who's good at keeping the audience's attention. Now, it's no coincidence that that's more or less the exact same criteria needed to be the commentary queen of Drag Race, meaning that you're the queen chosen to explain what's happening on each day of the shooting. You're somebody with a lot of reactions, somebody who's really animated, etc, etc. If you think I'm reaching here, we literally had a moment on All Stars 2 when a producer told Katya that she was really good at confessionals and that she gives them good material. And then what happens? Katya stays on for the entire season and is the confessionals queen of All Stars 2. But alongside Ginger, she was the commentary or confessionals queen on season 7. And then what happened? She had, or still has, the most popular show on WoW Presents. Other than Blue and maybe Cheryl, who else would have been the confessionals queen of Drag Race UK? They sure as hell did not want Davina to moan about how the Vivienne didn't like her for every confessional, nor did they want the Vivienne's eyebrows to scare the viewers away. They needed Baga to be chippy and cheery so that she could give us some of the best reactions in the confessionals. Those two things are what I believe to be the main reasons why Baga was kept and favored, and both boil down to one thing: being a likable, funny person. So kids, if you had to take one thing from this video, take this. If you want to make it far in life, you have to be likable and always make other people laugh, but not to the point where you convert yourself into the clown of the group. If you made it this far, thank you for watching first of all, and it would be really lovely if you subscribed, liked the video if you liked it of course, and followed me on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, I think that would be neat.